Hello, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We're going to give everybody a little bit of time to join, but not too long. We're getting excited and ready to jump right into this. Hey, Angie, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Sherry. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing very good. Are you ready for our very engaging talk about a really fun subject that we talk about a lot and get asked about a lot, which is this lovely GRC tool thing?
Yep, definitely going to be a wild and long conversation. Sucks we only have an hour, but we'll try to get as much in as possible.
Here we go. Exactly. Okay, well, with that, we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. Thank you so much, Angie, for taking the time to be here. Really appreciate that you're here, and we're going to have an extremely engaging conversation. We definitely want your questions. Thank you, everybody, so much for taking the time to join live. We want to hear your questions in real time. We want this to be very interactive. The whole GRC tool thing is a big topic of concern, of conversation, of dilemma, of controversy, and all of the above. And so definitely we want your questions, and we're going to monitor that as we go, and then we'll just answer them kind of in real time as they make sense. Today's agenda, you signed up for it, you know what that is. So let's just jump right into this thing. Okay, what is the GRC tool dilemma? I love this stat over on the right. I saw this. Actually, it's a little different than what I saw. I saw 400. This, I can't read that source, but it's from a source that showed that for 500 GRC tools on the market. 500. Oh my gosh, that is like insanity. I can't even wrap my brain around that. When I saw there was 400, I thought that was crazy, but 500 is nuts. But I got to tell you, from my perspective, probably not a week or two goes by that I get asked to look at another tool that's going to solve all the world's problems. And so there is definitely a ton of them out there. Angie, what are your thoughts? Why, how in the world did we end up with 500? How did we get that?
I think GRC is just such a wide topic. Everyone defines GRC differently. Organizations choose to do it differently. And so, same thing with tool companies and software companies. They're also defining, their own definition of GRC and what their tool, their perfect tool looks like, quote unquote, which we'll get into later. But I just think that there's so many definitions for GRC. There's so many different features that people think different programs need. And so, just like any other application or website, you make your own and you try to make it as best as possible, and somehow we end up with 500 of them.
Yeah, that's really good insight. You're right. This whole GRC thing, CISO, security, there's so many different definitions and nomenclature for what that stuff means in the minds of people. I think that's an excellent observation. And it's like everybody kind of has their flavor. Well, this tool doesn't do that flavor, so let me just go make another tool. I think it also begs to, I mean, we know you can't ignore this stuff. Like this is insanity. And I'm a tech person at heart. I'm a good nerd when it comes to some fun technology. And so, it's great to have a tool that can help to make this stuff more manageable for sure. But yeah, it's a little bit of overload. And we're going to talk about that. Like how in the world would you kind of process that as we go through this? We're also going to get really practical today. Like we're talking about some kind of high level and some theory and all that, but we actually have some screenshots of real GRC tools, like our versions of them. And so we're able to kind of walk through that and give our thought process of what we see and what we don't see, some real use cases. And so, Angie, thank you so much for putting that together for us today. We'll get to that a little bit later. But let's talk about some of the common mistakes that we see with tool selection. What's one of your favorite common mistakes that you see, Angie?
I think it's going to be the very first one, blaming the tool for failed strategy. People think that just buying the tool is going to solve all your problems. You're going to buy it, you're going to implement it, or sometimes even it's going to implement itself is some of the common,
Oh,
mistakes that people have. And so really it's just an importance on, yes, you bought the tool, but it's a tool. It's supposed to help you. It's supposed to, you still require some level of effort for you to get the tool off the ground and running. And so I think that's something, the very first misconception that needs to be kind of erased from people's minds.
yeah, I totally agree. And we see that a lot, unfortunately. I bought the tool, I wrote the check. Okay, but why isn't it doing everything it was supposed to do? Well, because just what you said, you have to have a strategy, you have to have a plan, you have to iterate through that plan. We're actually going to talk a little bit about that later, but yeah, we see that. The other thing, one of my favorites is the third one there, which is there is a perfect tool. There are no perfect tools. So sorry to the GRC tool companies, but there is no perfect tool. That is the reality. There are benefits of all of them, most all of them. And then there are some things where they fall short, quite honestly. And I like to say that what we do is almost as much art as it is science. And even with these tool applications, we, we have to navigate things that it's not a perfect tool. The company bought it for this, that, or the other reason, and it's not really achieving the outcomes they want to achieve because maybe they bought the sales lie in the beginning, or maybe they just kind of thought, hey, this thing would do everything that it promises to do, but maybe that's true, or maybe it just wasn't implemented. What else, Angie?
Yeah, so kind of related to that, I mean, just having a strategy and thinking about how you're going to implement it, just under resourcing that implementation process is super, a mistake. You do have to have a good enough, effort and team to get the tool off the ground. It takes a lot of preparation, especially,
Absolutely.
depending on where your organization is coming from. Are you just getting into the tool game? Do you have one already? It all depends on where you're at in the process. And so having that support from people is very important, at least in the beginning, to get the tool, up and running. And so that's also something that people, misconcept is you can only get the tool off the ground with one or two people. No, it sometimes requires a really large team to get it to where it needs to be in order to be sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that goes right to the next one. A lot of times we see non-existent GRC teams, or one person on a team, or a half a person. And what we a lot of times see is heads of security, or some of these, higher tier security engineers, or hey, you can do this too, right? In your spare time, just go do this thing. And that's just not realistic. But people are already over allocated in their jobs, and then you add this on top of it. To your point, Angie, like running the thing once it's all set up, like that might be realistic, but you brought up a great point. Like it's getting over that initial hump of the
Mhm.
implementation, and then depending on how many use cases you go after, the maturity, the complexity, all of those things, that's really where we see companies get stuck a lot, to be quite honest.
Yep, definitely.
So if someone's looking for a tool, what are some of the red flags? We've got a few of them listed here on the screen, but what are some of the red flags that maybe should cause someone to go, oh, wait a minute, because you just said it, like I bought the tool, wait, it's not done. Okay, well, if a tool company tells you that that's possible, then that's probably a red flag for you to be like, hold on, really, because does an easy button really exist in life? I have my easy button here somewhere that I love to pull off, because that's just not realistic. What are your thoughts, Angie?
Yeah, I think those vague sales demos and tool-centric demos kind of go together when the salesperson is focusing on the shiny features or, hey, look, this cool button does this one thing for you. It's really just tool-centric. It's really focusing on what the actual tool is doing. It doesn't focus on the outcomes of the tool. How is it going to benefit your organization? How is it going to benefit your GRC program? But no, we're just focusing on the pretty colors, the pretty UI. And I've said this before, pretty doesn't equal functional. And I think that when the salesperson is trying to just show you things and tell you that, oh, this is nice, and this button does this, and this tab does this. Okay, but what is the real overarching outcome of what I'm trying to achieve? And does the tool achieve that? And when you ask those questions and they don't know how to answer that, or they just skip over and say, oh, maybe not, but it does this, but it's not related to anything GRC, or not what your outcome is for you're looking for your organization, that's when I think that's a major red flag in the process.
Yeah, that's a really great point. So I experience that somewhat regularly. I'll be looking at a new tool. Somebody will want to show it, and we'll be taking a look at it, because we want to stay on top of this stuff with what's out there in the market. Not all 500, but as many as we can. And so it's exactly what you just said. You'll ask a question, and then the answer will go somewhere else. And okay, let me ask my question again. The answer will go somewhere else. And the reality is, a lot of times they just don't have a good answer for the question that you ask. So that's an excellent point. So for our listeners, like when you're doing these demos, I always come at them with the tough use cases. Like, I understand automation. Like I get that. But let me do this exception kind of ask. And then that's where a lot of times they struggle because that you just hit the boundary of the tool. So if you can try to like ask questions to find the boundaries of the tool and really go after the more complex, harder use cases to ask, but then really watch for that vagueness in the answers, because that vagueness and not clear, direct answers to what you've asked is typically you've just hit a boundary of the platform. So I love that. What about that no hands-on access? Just heard this feedback from a potential client that they were interested in a tool, but then, hey, I couldn't get my hands on it, and I don't know exactly what I thought about that. What do you think about that, Angie?
Yeah, I think a good tool that is a good tool company that is confident in their product should offer at least some type of trial or demo environment that the person trying to seek out the tool can mess around with and get in there and really see how it's going to benefit your organization or work for your organization. If the company doesn't provide something like that, it's sort of like when you buy or buy something without looking at it first. When you go buy a car, you take a test drive and you make sure it's what you're looking for. If you can't do that with a GRC tool, you're kind of just like buying it blindly and hoping that it'll work eventually, or it'll match what the sales pitch was. And so I think that that's something to at least try to fight for if you're having a demo and you can ask, hey, can I get an environment that I can test in? And if they say no, well, then maybe that's a red flag.
Yeah. Now, that's great points. To their defense, if the tool is heavily about automation, then it's harder to kind of like a blank instance is going to be very hard for a company to kind of see. But to your point, Angie, what I always say is give me a demo instance, like
Mhm.
hook it up to demo automation, just so I can at least to see how this thing works. I can see how the policy works. I can see how I can log this. I mean, it doesn't have to be an empty instance because sometimes these tool companies are like, oh, but an empty one really would make sense and you'd have to set it all up. That's fine. I 1,000% understand that. But the reality is, then give me an access to a demo, just like what you said. I can at least kind of get a flavor of it. If I can't buy that car because it's going to show up on a ship, well, let me drive one that's very similar to it. And then I at least know that when it comes, I'm going to like it. So excellent, excellent analogy. So on that, there's three from my perspective, and Angie would love to hear your thoughts on this as well. There's three very broad stroke categories of GRC tools. Obviously, 500 tools, there's a lot of nuances, but very broad stroke. So the first one there are the tools that have led with automation first, and those really came on the scene in the last 5-ish years, and it's all about automate, automate, automate. And again, I'm a tech nerd. I love technology. I can sit on a Saturday and play with all sorts of nerdy technology stuff, but I'm also about outcomes and achieving goals and building programs. And so the automation, while that's great, um, oh, hold on, I'm going to pause this for a second. Somebody asked a question. What's one thing most teams overlook during vendor demos? That's an excellent question. What would be your thoughts?
Hmm. I think probably understanding the tool's structure, and if that doesn't make sense, I'm speaking more like, is this a tool that was built kind of related to this? Is this a tool that was built more for technical teams? Is it built more for a certain industry? Sometimes during sales pitches, they're just trying to sell you the tool. They're not really focusing on your organization, or they might not know your organization that well. So I think that when you're requesting or you're going through a demo or you're requesting more information on the tool, you should really ask the hard questions. What was this tool built for? Who
Yeah.
was the intended audience and who was the intended industry? And if that doesn't align with your organization, then maybe it's not a good tool for you to even consider. And I think that's what people forget is just what was the tool built for and
Yeah.
and why are we here in the first place?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. If it was built for SMB and your enterprise, well, is it really going to serve you well? And then the main thing that I think is overlooked is, you know, during demos, it's all about this feature and this feature and this pretty button and this and this and this. And if you don't come very clearly with outcomes to the demo, you can be looking at something because it's pretty and shiny, but is it actually going to achieve your goals? So that would be my answer to add to what you said.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you. So three broad categories of GRC tools. They're the ones that were built with automation first. So there's a lot of automation capabilities, but But what we see with a lot of those is they're not really full end-to-end GRC platforms. I remember one of these a few years back. I asked, well, where would you log your issues when things fail? And the response was, oh, never been asked that question before. And I'm like, I'm not sure how that's possible. You've never been asked that question before, but that was the answer. And so automation first is great for the automation capabilities. But again, in all of these buckets, there is no perfect tool. That's what we always must remember. But the automation is, there's some good value there, but a lot of times it's at the cost of, it's not really a full end-to-end robust GRC platform. Then on the right, you have your enterprise tools. Pretty much I meet a new client, they're interested in a tool, they'll tell me right off the bat, but we don't want Archer. I'm like, no, I don't want Archer either. So that's the reality. Archer's been in my career numerous times. And so I'm very familiar with it. So the Archers, the ServiceNows, the metric streams, those are the really big enterprise ones. And if you're a large enterprise company, then you might need that sort of level of customization and configurability. I come out of banking, and so we had a lot of, really high risk and compliance demands and to try to solution that. And so, obviously that's where Archer has shined for many, many years. However, recognize you're going to need a full IT team to manage the thing. So it's going to be expensive to buy it and it's going to be expensive to maintain. So a lot of companies are kind of moving away from that because now this middle has emerged, which is kind of a blend. And again, these are just three very broad buckets. We could analyze all 500 and maybe come up with some more. These are very broad buckets. But this middle ground is really nice. It's a very nice sweet spot because it's, yes, we're going to focus on automation. Yes, we're going to grab as much of that as we can, but we're not going to do that at the compromise of full end-to-end GRC. And so that really is kind of the middle grade and the sweet spot. Angie, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that the middle market really focuses on a blend of the two where, it enhances usability that the automation doesn't have. And then it also balances, just being able to configure it and customize it to yourself. That enterprise grade tools offer, most of the time custom fields, all that stuff. So I think it's a really good balance, at least for those organizations that are starting off or just getting a tool lifted up off the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned configurability. I mean, there's definitely levels of configurability within that kind of middle band. The bottom has a little bit of it, but not too much. And then of course the enterprise has a lot, but now you're having to hire IT staff to manage and some tools are better than others about being configurable. There's kind of like it's great to be customizable and configurable, but then the downside is like like back when I was in banking, we re-implemented Archer, I think 3 times
Mm.
because we could do so much to it. We ended up messing it up. And so we had to start all over again to try to leverage the best practice. So, there's definitely pros and cons. Now, I did say there is no perfect tool. However, there might actually be, because the number one GRC tool on the planet is what, Angie?
Excel and spreadsheets.
Excel, there we go. So maybe I was wrong. Maybe there is a perfect tool. And so we see this all the time, flavors of Excel or Jira or Smartsheet or QuickBase or insert your tool here. Google Sheets. Sorry, I missed another really big one. And so, yes, those are great starting points. They're a great way to kind of start to track and centralize, but they are by no means a GRC tool. You leverage they're very like two-dimensional, and so you
Mhm.
miss the multi-dimensional aspects of mapping and linking things together. And then of course the automation, you lose all the automation of really being able to automate. And so but I laugh because it is truly the number one GRC tool on the planet, which perhaps is why we have 500 because everybody's trying to figure out how to get people out of Excel. So what else is the GRC tool not?
Yeah, like we've said, I guess a bunch of times so far, it's not going to be the magic button. Automation is cool. Tools are, some of them have implemented AI now, and AI is also not the magic button. And so just
Yeah.
remembering that the tool is not going to do the work for the organization. You really have to put in effort to get it off the ground and to sustain it. It's not just implementing it one time and letting it run. It still needs constant data, implementation and refreshing, and you can't just put in data one time and let it become stale. It's a constant effort. And also, just like I said before, not a pretty dashboard. I don't really um, care so much about how the tool looks. It's more about what the tool does for me and what it's going to make better in my inside of my GRC program.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. So UI is important, the user interface, when you're pushing your tool out across your organization. So that would be part of the things in how someone is building their program and how they're going to run it, that they would need to understand the outcomes of that. Because you always, we see it a lot. Tools get purchased, but they don't get adopted. They don't get fully implemented, but they also don't get adopted. And so adoption is definitely a thing. So the UI could be part of adoption. But how you configure the tool can be part of adoption as well. And so the whole point is to not be wowed by, ooh, the pretty red and green, and isn't this so awesome? And this is the one I need to buy because it has the pretty red and green. Maybe, maybe not. Again, it goes back to outcomes. So really good point.
Yep.
So what should you be considering? Oh, wait, hold on. Another question. What is a good sign that a tool might not be the right fit? I think two things that I literally just said would be good answers to that. So if the tool is not fully implemented, meaning we still have Excel tracking or Google Sheet tracking or Jira, if we're still using those things offline of the tool, then the tool didn't get fully implemented. So that's a sign, because if you buy a tool to run a thing, this should run the full end-to-end GRC process: governance, policies, controls, risk, your risk assessments, your risk remediation, compliance, of course, alignment to your frameworks, crosswalking, like the full spectrum. When things go wrong, and they do, the tracking of that, like full spectrum. Automation, for automation, we can go after all of that. And so if you are still doing offline things, then the tool didn't get fully implemented, and that's a really good sign. The other thing, it could be an adoption problem, just what we were just talking about. If one person uses the tool and nobody else uses it, that's not ideal either. We do this with clients all the time. Your control owners and your risk owners should be coached and trained to come into your platform and be held accountable to what they're supposed to be doing. They shouldn't be doing offline activities, and nor should the people running these programs. So if you've got a tool and one person uses it and that's it, that could be a sign that maybe it's not a right fit. What other things do you think, Angie, are good indicators that a tool might not be a right fit?
Maybe just if a tool has been sitting there and people are trying to use it, but it's just not working. Maybe they don't understand how the tool works. Maybe there's a lack of support from the tool company, or maybe it just requires a level of technical, knowledge that the team doesn't have. And so now you've purchased a tool that was maybe built for more technical, software coding teams, and you're trying to use it for people day-to-day business users who don't know how to code.
Yep.
That's probably a good sign that it's not going to be a good tool, because you can't teach someone how to code. Well, you can, but it's harder to
Yeah.
teach someone how to code than just switching to a different tool that's not built for coders.
Yep. Nope. That's all very good points. So when buying a tool, there on the screen are some different things that you should look at. The first one is the one that's near and dear to me, and we've kind of alluded to it already. We do GRC not to create a bunch of busy work for ourselves. We do it to provide value and outcomes for the organization. The activities of building and running our cyber program should align to and support the overall business objectives. So when you're buying a tool, you would want to start from a place of what are your outcomes, what are your objectives, and that's how you get that business alignment. And that's super important. And we see a lot of companies skip that, and they just go straight to the cool demo and the easy button, and then, oh, but the tool didn't do this and didn't do this and didn't do this, and they didn't really think about that. And then that's where it can land and kind of lead to it being shelfware. But it's very important to come at this with, we are trying to accomplish a goal and an objective for the organization. I love to give this analogy. If I'm trying to build something, I'm going to go to Home Depot or Lowe's and look at hammers. But I'm looking at the hammer in the context of what I'm trying to do. So I can talk to 10 hammer salespeople, and I don't really care about their stupid hammer. I'm trying to accomplish X. Is your hammer going to help me do that? And so that is really the nature of it. What else should people consider before ideally choosing a tool?
Yeah, I think that third one, budget and total cost of ownership, is important. It's just not how much the tool is going to cost you. You also have to factor in training and admin resources. How long is it going to take how much is it going to cost you to train people to learn how to use the tool? How long is it going to take you to assign people to have ownership, to adopt the tool and continue to sustain it? And so I think it's a good idea to have people stop thinking about cost as just, oh, this is how much I pay for it monthly, but instead being a holistic view of this is how much it cost me the software, but also here's how much I'm putting into, the people and the resources running the tool, as well as training and admin costs and all of the above.
Yeah, and you make me think of a really good point. Recently, I had to change the password keeper that I had used because it just was not, the support was awful and it was not meeting the mark, and I had to switch. Can I tell you, because you can't export all your passwords safely, it was pain to move all that over. I say, bring that up to say exactly what you said. That's part of the total cost of ownership. While it may look attractive that it's $3 in the beginning or whatever it is, you look at the whole thing and oh my gosh, not that you would make a decision today for 20 years down the road, but if you're having to switch this thing in a few years, there's huge costs and huge disruption to the organization of that. If you buy something that's shelfware, there's huge costs associated with that. And then if you buy something that doesn't get you through your timeline, such that you've lost time that you can never get back, there's no cost. Remember those commercials that would say priceless? It's not priceless, it's unrecoverable, quite honestly. And so those are huge. So thank you for bringing that up. I think, some of these other things like what integration does it do if you're looking for automation is super important. I think how the company supports is really important, and a lot of people would think about these things. We kind of talked about who do they serve. If it's a GRC tool that predominantly serves SMB and your enterprise, oh my gosh, red flag, red flag, red flag. Seriously, because they just don't have a base that they even know what enterprise looks like. Or if you're in banking or protecting PHI or something like that, do they even know what that means? Because that's very relevant. And so you would consider that as part of choosing, which is kind of what the left side there in the blue is. And this I feel like is things that people don't always think about is what about the company? I know there's, because GRC tools are coming on and off the scene so quickly, you don't want to like choose a tool that goes away or chooses a tool that doesn't have a good roadmap or choose a tool. Oh my gosh, the demos, Angie, it's going to make you laugh. The demos where I hear, oh yeah, we're working on that. Oh yeah, we're working on that. Oh yeah, we're working on that. Okay, you've said that like 10 times in this demo. And then you have to ask yourself, is it going to actually happen? It's a lot of working on stuff. And so then there's that. And so really asking those questions around the company itself. What else would you add to that?
Yeah, I think also there's GRC companies that are just starting out. There's GRC companies that are created by, people who have been in the industry for so long. And I think one of the most important things is just the security posture of the tool. Are you vetting the tool? Where did it come from? Who built it? Because you're going to be putting sensitive information into this tool. It's your entire, governance risk compliance program. Sometimes you'll have sensitive data like, flow charts and diagrams and system descriptions. Do you want to put that in a tool that doesn't even follow compliance standards themselves? These are very important questions to go through before you even make it to the step of buying the tool.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And something you said made me chuckle. What was the vision for the tool? So a lot of times these tools come out of practitioners who, like, like us, that there is no perfect tool. So they're like, oh, I know how to build one. They go off and build it. But can I tell you, I've seen demos from companies that are like, oh, look, there's this great opportunity in the market, and we're just going to go off and do this thing. And they're not practitioners.
Yep.
And I mean, that's fine if it's a solid tool and gets you what you need, but these are the kind of the subjective things that I feel like you would think about as you go through this. Awesome. Let's just briefly touch on the trust center trap. So some of the GRC tools are doing the trust center, and so this is where you run your program in the tool, and then there's this lovely page that you can post on your website or have a link to, and then it's green or it's red, and so your customers can be like, oh yeah, check, yeah, everything's going great, that's wonderful. That's great in theory, but it you don't know what's like underlying that. And so it's great to have a green button, but you really don't know what's going into that. And then a lot of these tools that are automation, again, let's remember they're not necessarily full GRC programs. So You just can't automate everything. You just cannot automate everything. I hear that. I want to automate everything. But okay, time out.
Yes.
Can't automate everything. That's the reality. Maybe in when Terminator takes over the world, maybe. But we just can't automate everything. So it's great. So take the trust center with a grain of salt. Like there's some good information there, but it's only as good as what's underlying it. And there's the part that we need to think about because some of the GRC tools are offering them and some are not. And then it's a legal issue, quite honestly. Are you going to expose that kind of information to the world or even to your customers? Like that's becomes then a legal and a liability issue. Any additional thoughts you have on the trust center?
Yeah, I think what you said is the trust center is just, as good as the data that goes into it. So if my data, and also as bad as the data that goes into it.
Yeah.
So if my data is stale and it's not showing my current, posture, and I'm presenting this to my clients as an organization, they're judging me on what they see. Same, on the flip side, if I'm just going into my GRC tool and flipping everything to healthy, flipping everything to secure, and that's what they see, then there's no is it really, am I really trusting the trust center at this point? So yeah, I think it's a good idea, but it's not where it's supposed to be or should be right now.
So just take it with a grain of salt. I know it makes
Mhm.
me think of one client that we worked with, that very large company that they endpoint management. Oh yeah, we do that. Absolutely. Great. Perfect. Wonderful. When we start digging in, I think it was 1/3 of their employees hadn't been registered into the endpoint management. So the control could have looked green all day long, but it's missing a third of the endpoints. And who would know that except for somebody dug in and figured that out? But it would look green, would look good on paper. And so there's where the liability comes in. That's where this is a legal problem because now the liability comes in. But you told me it was green. Oh, but whoops, we only had 5 computers in there, or we only had these servers, or we only had this. Like, whoopsie, that's now a legal problem. So very, very good points. Thank you. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a common must-have feature that people demand that often doesn't actually drive value? Oh, that's an interesting question. Is there a common must-have feature that people demand that often doesn't actually drive value? I can think of one. The whole notion of the pre-populated policies or the pre-populated risks. That would be, I don't know if everybody would say it's a must-have feature, but like, oh, well, are there any policy templates I could go ahead and use in there? Angie, what is wrong with that?
No organization is the same. Yeah, I can throw in a template in there and sure, it's going to give you a basis, but if that's what you're planning to use as your policy, that's not good.
And risk the same way. There should be risk identification processes.
Yeah.
Like, sure, are there similar threats, similar risk? Yeah, of course we know that. But a risk process, you actually go through and identify those risks. This whole notion of just picking from a library and, score, and woohoo, I did a risk assessment in 5 minutes or less. That doesn't drive value across the organization. Risk management and risk identification and proper assessment, that absolutely drives decision making and value across the organization. Excellent question. Thank you. Okay, so if you have a tool, great. If you don't have a tool, there's kind of two lanes here. But basically, we've talked about some of this stuff, so we'll go through this quickly. But this is really about outcomes, defining the outcomes, making sure that it aligns to the business. Then what are the use cases that we're going to put on this tool? And then, oh my gosh, have a plan. If you need to buy a tool, make sure you evaluate according to those use cases. And then, you're going to have resources on this. It's going to take money, it's going to take time, it's going to take people, all of the above. It might take third parties to help really get this thing to where it needs to be. And then the idea is you want to put a plan in place. That plan needs to have ownership, it needs to have timelines, and then go get this thing done. And then we're done, right, Angie? And we never have to look at it again. Is that the way this is? Oh, come
Absolutely.
on. No, you popped the bubble. Okay,
Yep.
so now what?
This is just a continuous cycle. You start right back where you started because you want to make sure that you're continuously doing this, that your program is consistently running and it's sustaining and it's growing with your organization. You just don't want to, oh, we did it, yay! But now we have, a different program we're running or a different framework, and that's not in the tool. Oh, it doesn't have to be. We have all other four frameworks in there. No, it should be something you're continuously working on and progressing, and you know, it's
Yeah.
never mature. You can keep maturing, as you go.
Yeah, there is no end point. That's a very excellent point. And your business changes, the world changes. And if it's a SaaS tool, which most of these are, guess what? That tool is changing. So positively or negatively. And so how often do we see it? We see it all the time where companies buy a tool, they never look at it again. And oh, in the last year, the tool has released this, and this, but you're not actually taking advantage of any of that because there isn't this cycle of doing that. And then the other thing is the tool, with over 500 GRC tools on the market, is the tool I bought 2, 3 years ago, is that still the right tool? Would
Hmm.
we would we take that lens of a look at things?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea, especially if, now you have a tool that maybe better suits your needs all of a
Yeah.
sudden. And, you know,
Yeah.
it's never, you're never married to a tool. You can continue to, like, you can shop around at the beginning, you can shop around in the middle, just reassess your outcomes and see what's fits better for the organization, definitely.
Absolutely. And and it's expensive and it's hard to change, so do it with extreme caution.
Right.
However, we see it where companies, bought a tool X years ago and they just keep hanging on for dear life, and it's like, "Oh my gosh, there's so much of a better option out here." And when the cost of switching is a lot and the pain of switching is a lot, but if day to day you're tracking things outside of the tool and day to day you're tap dancing around the tool, then you're not really getting the value and the efficiency anyway.
Yep.
So it might be time to kind of reassess that. So this is just all part of the care and feeding of how we do this thing. And then big reminder, there is no perfect tool. Every one of them has the pluses and minuses for certain. The whole point is if we have solid processes, we understand what those processes are, we have outcomes that are clearly defined that we know, then we can make the best choice. We can buy the best hammer for the job, for example. And then if that hammer stops performing, we can go and get another one. Or if my needs change, then we can go and get another one. But this is all about running, building and running a program, and then the tool fits to that. But I got to say, Angie, we see a lot of this backwards. Just like we
Hmm.
see companies go after audits and they forget that they're protecting businesses. Oh, it's about passing audit. And then I hear executives say, but we passed our audit, so we must be secure. No, because you don't understand the nuances of this, unfortunately. And so, though, can you be secure and pass your audit? Absolutely. But you got to go after the right thing first. And so instead of going after the tool first, and I don't even know what I'm doing, but let me go buy a tool because that salesperson gave me a great demo and it was pretty colors and I think I'll get that. Great. And I can automate everything. Woo! We see that a lot. Okay, great. But then what's your program? What's your outcomes? What do you, I have no idea. Okay, so the tool is driving that. That's backwards. That's no different than you should be secure because you did proper risk assessment and risk identification, and you know what you need to do to bring security into your business. And then, oh, by the way, yes, I'm going to be able to pass these audits. And so again, a lot of times we see this backwards, which is what we're here to speak out against. Any other comments you have on the no perfect tool before we jump into some screenshots?
No, just definitely, it's better to spend the time to make sure you're aligning than striving for perfection. Because if you're doing that, then you're going to be in the shopping game for a long time, I'll tell you.
Oh, so that's a really good point. I'm so glad you brought that up. And especially a lot of security and tech people by nature are very analytically deep, and it's easy to get stuck on every little detail and not move forward. Meanwhile, you're not running things well, you're not monitoring things, you're stuck in Excel, whatever it is. So don't do that. Yeah, that's an excellent point. Like, don't get stuck. But on the flip side, don't just knee jerk to the first pretty thing that you see
Yep.
and buy it. There needs to be more due diligence. So definitely a balance of those two. I love that you brought that up. That's awesome. Okay, so these are real dashboards of real GRC tools that we work with, and they're just kind of all mixed in here. And what we're going to do is Let's see. I'm looking at my questions here. Hold on to see if there's anything. Okay, no. What we're going to do is kind of talk about what do we see when we see these tools? Like what do we look for? What are things that we see and just kind of talk through that. So almost like a verbal kind of demo. So I see three different dashboards on the screen. Albeit it's tiny, so I have a hard time seeing it. It's tiny for me. So, but I see three there. So the one on the left is very visual and it's got some really good metrics there to help know right away, like, where should I spend my attention? The reality is this stuff is massive. Like, it is massive. There's so many moving parts. And again, I'll go back to there's most teams are skinny or non-existent. We know because that's what we do for companies. And so that makes it really hard. I've got hundreds of controls and I'm trying to like manage all this stuff and I'm dealing with, lots of people that may or may not be participating and doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I really need something that can focus my attention exactly to where I need to spend my attention. And so you can see the one on the left there, it's got, especially in the center, it's got buckets of controls. So I've got controls that are healthy, controls that are not healthy, controls that have failed their testing or where perhaps evidence has gone out of date. And so immediately I'm able to see the health of my program at a glance. I love that. And that's where I always want to start because, in my opinion, that is the crown of like all the underlying activities that we do. Plus, that's where the tool really gives value is out of, 500 things. Where are the 12 things that I need to be focusing my attention? And that really helps. What else do you see, Angie, there?
Yeah, so I think that a dashboard, is good when it gives you those insights right away, those gaps, where you have to focus your efforts on. And like we've said before, maybe as, different to running it in a spreadsheet. You don't have that called out to you. You have to go through the entire spreadsheet or
Yep.
wherever you're doing your program and look for it. Whereas your dashboard is meant to say, hey, this is where you're falling short. These are your problem areas. This is where, most attention is required. And so when every organization is different. Some organizations utilize reporting and they have to report to their executives on a
Yep.
certain cadence. So if you're that type of organization, I would go for, a dashboard that's going to give me quick realizations like the one on the left. If you're more of an internal reporting team who you just want something quick and easy access, maybe you're more technical, maybe you're used to more of that like text-based, governance. Maybe you like something like on the bottom right. So it's all about preference. I don't really, I like a good mix of both. So that one on the left gives me both text information, but also visual information that I can click into. Dynamic dashboards are really important as well, because if you're just seeing the information and it's just there, but I still have to go look for it in my tool, that's not so great. But if I have something I can easily click into and filter, that's where those tools are gonna, for me at least, draw my attention to them more a little bit.
Yeah, I like how you covered, the two layers. Like I have communication readouts that I need to cover, like with executives and boards, but I also have efficiency within running the program. So I need it to do both. A lot of the tools do actually hook up to Power BI or some other dash or have built-in dashboarding capabilities. So you would definitely want that. A static dashboard is great. It's easy to like launch quickly, but then you're stuck with that's all there is. And so then when you need to tell a different story to your executives, that's where you're going to have to crack into something that may be a little bit more tailored. And somebody asked a great question. I struggled to get useful reporting out of our current tool. What should I look for to improve that? That's an excellent question. If I always say that we do all the work we do, and it's the story that we tell that gives value across the organization to what we do. And so the dashboards and the reporting is how you do that. It's how you tell the story, but you have to decide the story that you're going to tell. So to that question, I would say one, you got to have the underlying data and processes. If you don't have solid processes underlying, for example, You only look at your controls one time a year when the auditors come. Okay, that's a terrible underlying compliance process. That's no compliance process actually. And so it's going to be very difficult to get useful reporting out of that because the underlying data and the process that keeps that data healthy is lacking. So there's the one side. The other side is you get you need to get useful reporting, you need to know the story that you're telling. And so you build the reporting around the story that you're trying to tell. If you're trying to tell the story at the organization that we are monitoring risk and this is our risk posture on any given time, then you need to have that vision of the story that you're going to tell. And then, okay, what does that look like? And then what is the underlying data and processes in the platform that would bubble up to that? And then in those cases, a lot of times you do have to build kind of like custom dashboards, which is where when the tools hook up to like a Power BI, for example, that's
Mhm.
amazing. So, Angie, do you have anything else to add for the useful reporting?
Yep, agreed. And yeah, some tools have support from the tool, vendors themselves. So you can always reach out to them and see if there's something more advanced that can be built into the tool. And like you said, Sherry, if it's not, then Power BI and other integrations with other visualization applications are super helpful in this case. But definitely having the data is the most important part.
Yeah. So that's part of picking the tool is what are the underlying processes that you're going to run and then what's the story you're ultimately trying to tell. And then you want to make sure you pick a tool that can support that. That's why it's about the outcomes. It's not about, oh, but my tool does this and this. It's about what are you trying to accomplish in running your program and socializing it across the organization. Let's talk about programs. So this is what these would be your requirements. So these would be your frameworks, your regulatory, your requirements. Angie, what's on the screen for these?
Yeah, so here, you have two different tools, you have different frameworks being showcased. You can tell, on the one at the top, you can tell controls that are in place and how many of them are implemented. And then at the bottom, you have a more dynamic visualization of the same thing, your requirements, and it looks like there's red, yellow, and green depending on the implementation of those requirements. And so here, the outcomes really is just showcasing your framework, showcasing where you're at in each framework. If you're a multi-framework organization, you want to be able to tell how you're doing across them. If on the bottom one, it looks like they're doing a SOC 2 ISO program. So if you're doing like a multi-framework cross-mapping, that's very helpful to have as well. That way you know where your controls are overlapping. And so definitely that's the type of outcome and information that you're looking for in a tool.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's two parts of running a program. There's implementing it in the beginning, so that's your control design and implementation. And then the other side of it is your control effectiveness or the operation of your controls. And so you should be reporting both all the time. So for SOC 2, for ISO, for HIPAA, whatever it is. Or as Angie said, for multiple things together, you build one compliance program that satisfies many. That's the more mature state. But at any given time, you should be able to show we are 98% implemented, controls designed and implemented, and we are 83% of actually operating those controls. And though this is where you get into the frequency of monitoring your controls. And I think I'll just go to the next page because that is about controls, where now you have your controls defined. What's going to be my frequency of monitoring this thing? I may have a control that is something that happens on an event or a transactional control, like somebody leaves the company. So then there's termination controls around that where I terminate their access or whatever. Those can happen on any day, but I'm not going to monitor them daily, but I might monitor it monthly or I might monitor it quarterly. And so really defining at the control level, what's going to be your monitoring cadence. And it shouldn't be, well, when do the auditors come? That's the wrong answer. That's not monitoring anything. That's just crossing all your fingers and hoping that you pass. And that's a terrible way to do this stuff. But we see that a lot, unfortunately. With these tools, this is where you really get the advantage of saying, hey, okay, this control, it's highly manual. There's a lot of churn in the department that runs it. So we're going to really, and it's really critical to our risks, to mitigating our risks and to our security posture. So we're going to monitor this thing monthly. and this is what we're going to do. And then you can set that up in the tool and get the automation capabilities of monitoring that thing monthly. And then there's the operation of it where you can also say, hey, control owner, you're supposed to do this thing quarterly. And so then the tool can help to kind of follow up with that. What else about controls that they should be thinking about with tools?
Yeah, so if the tool, has that important piece of like monitoring and health and all of that good stuff, you also want a GRC tool that supports control mapping to requirements, because at the end of the day, you want to reduce the effort of having to manually review your controls and then manually, have to review your framework and see where you stand. You want a tool that does that for you. The mapping easily allows for if the control health drops or if a test fails, it automatically takes the requirement and also, fails the requirement or, says it's not implemented. So you want a tool that'll take that manual step of having to keep all these things together overlapping, and you want that tool to do it for you. In this case, you have these two tools that have that mapping and those connections. And so if your control fails or something bad happens to it, or if your control is healthy, it's also going to change the health or the implementation status of your requirement for any framework, especially if you're doing them across different frameworks. You want that, process to be in there so that you don't have to manually map all of these frameworks. It's one control mapped to many frameworks if you're a multi-framework organization.
Which many are. Yeah, security
Mhm.
awareness training is security awareness training. Like if I have one compliance framework or I have 10, a lot of them have that in there, flavors of
Mhm.
that. So that's what it is. And then you should monitor security awareness training. Hard stop. And then if it fails, or if you're like one person so I was talking to who just thought 100% was unachievable, and it is achievable. We see it all the time. It's very much achievable. And it is the expectation is that 100% of your people do security awareness training consistently. And so you're able to monitor that. But if you're like, oh, we're only at 82%. Okay, well, you just failed four of your frameworks. Like, did you know that? Not just one, four. Likewise, we see companies definitely build them in silos. So I'm doing my ISO, I'm doing my SOC 2. Sometimes they're even owned by different people. And then now look at the incredible inefficiencies of security awareness training, security awareness training, security awareness training. And then you start, that one seems pretty, that's just like one thing. But then think about like user access reviews. There's like all sorts of dimensions of that with different roles and permissions and tools and all of that, and really keeping that straight. And you have to be highly organized to stay on top of something like that. But then to know when it fails, and they do, what have I just impacted, which is what you were talking about, Angie, of what really is that overlap and that cross across the board. And then if we take it the next step, I'm going to skip ahead just a smidge. Then if we take it the next step and we really build this thing the way we're supposed to build it, now my compliance is tied to my risk because controls do what?
They affect, they map to risks because they affect if your control's unhealthy, you've just introduced a risk into your organization.
That's correct. If I do risk assessment in a bubble separate from control, which we see compliance, which we see a ton, then I think, oh, my risk is here. I'm good, right? But oh, meanwhile, over here, your control failed. That control is mitigating that risk. So you're not where you thought you were, but you don't have those two halves pulled together, which again is more of that kind of multi-dimensional that you can never really achieve in a spreadsheet, to be quite honest. This is the crown of these tools. And so if you go through that trouble of mapping your controls, because controls mitigate risk, to those risks now, and then you monitor your controls, they're healthy, they're not healthy, they're in a right state, they're not in a right state, they're implemented and designed, they're operating, like those aspects of it. Now I exactly know what my risk posture is in real time because I'm doing this activity over here. What are we looking at here on the screen?
Yeah, so just related to that mapping exercise, on the left side, this is a tool that handles that mapping via connections. And so if you look at the left screenshot towards the right bottom corner, you see those connections. You see how risks are mapping to controls. You see how risks are mapping to assets. So if any of those certain items that you have in your GRC tool fail, they're automatically going to introduce that risk. And then in both screenshots, you're seeing a risk heat map. They handle the X and Y axis, a little bit differently, but basically you're seeing your residual and your inherent risks, where you're at. And these are both dynamic, so you can easily click into them. You'll be sent to that compilation of risks that you're viewing. That way you can filter for, maybe you only want to focus on the high ones, maybe you want to focus on the low ones, whatever. Some GRC tools, the one on the right, allows you to filter by impacts and by categories. So really it's dependent on how, some organizations have corporate wide risk registers. Some organizations like doing department risk registers. So it really is dependent on how you handle risk in your organization. But a good GRC tool is going to have a dynamic risk heat map like this, at least, which goes into reporting, and it goes into being able to quickly identify those risks that need the most work.
Yeah, you bring up good points. And when I'm looking at the screen, I'm seeing two different views. I mean, quite frankly, they're not that dissimilar, right? And this is where, if you do the evaluation on the features of the tools, oh my gosh, it can be so much noise because, oh, it does this, it does this, it does this. It's like, woohoo, that's awesome. But I love what you just said. Do you have one risk register in your organization? Is it, or do you have them across the teams? Like those are the outcomes. Like I'm looking to do this risk posture. I'm looking to do it in this way. We have defined how we do our risk methodology and how we score. And when you have those things, then you're able to come at the tool like this is what I'm looking to accomplish. This is the outcomes that I need. And then this becomes in the context of that. That's why that's so important because again, if I'm looking at these screenshots, I'm like, okay, they
Yeah.
both look great. So how would I pick one or the other? And with 500 tools, I'd get very tired of looking at tools very quickly, and I'd probably just give up and just pick one. The nicest person or the lowest price or some factor that really is not the way that you pick these things. So really, really good point. Anything else on this that you would point out? I'll back up a little bit.
Um, obviously, I think just like you said, other outcomes, I know the one on the top right is mapping risks to issues, and a good GRC tool will allow you to, come up with issues and incidents based on risks. Because at the end of the day, sure, cool, you have a risk heat map, you have risks, but if there's no mitigation efforts or
Yep.
plan coming from that risk that you can easily assign to somebody or to a department within your GRC tool, you're also missing half of the work because now, yes, you've identified a risk, but what's being done with it? Nothing. So you also want to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, really good point. Issues, and I'll just switch to the task view because issues would be similar to tasks.
Oh.
But the GRC tools should definitely have issues and or findings, I mean call them whatever, or tasks, whatever you want to call them. The whole point is these are the items that have been identified that need attention. So, and they come from different sources, just what you're talking about. So if you do a risk assessment and then you have risk tolerance defined for the organization, and I have something that's outside of that, the residual risk is outside of that, that means it needs to be treated. So one of the treatments is mitigation. Great. How am I tracking that? Okay, well, Excel, if you said Excel or Jira here, that was not the right answer. That should not be how we're tracking that because that issue maps back to a risk in that particular case. But then I also have controls that I'm monitoring, right? And Susie was supposed to do her quarterly UAR and she's out on vacation and she forgot. Okay, that's a failure. So we need to fix that. And so we would log an issue for that as well because it needs attention. And then we need to find out that, oh, Susie needs a backup or Susie
Mhm.
needs an automated reminder or we need to shift it to the beginning of the quarter as the due date. Well, however we address that, but we've addressed that. And so then we can close that issue or that finding. Again, the naming is irrelevant. It's the mechanism. Then there's also low maturity. Or there's also external audit findings, or there's also tribal knowledge about the organization. All of these things creating a culture of risk across our organization that, hey, these things need attention, they need to be addressed. And so we're capturing all of that. And that's the job of the GRC tool. And then to what you said, Angie, it has to map out to this is the risk it's affecting, or this is the control that it's affecting, or this is the policy that it's affecting. We didn't talk about policy, but that would be a piece of this high as well. And then the last screenshots here that I'll pull up is vendors. Third-party risk management is huge. It's a part of risk. And so absolutely the tool should help you with your third-party risk management due diligence, not in a checkbox sort of way, but actually assessing the risk of these third parties that you're entrusting to adhere to certain security standards and hold your data. So again, varying tools do different things, build custom questionnaires. There should be some kind of scoring in that. But again, how do you do your third-party risk management process? What does that look like? What are the outcomes? What are you looking to achieve? And then you bring those outcomes to the tool. We have about 1 minute. Any comments there, Angie?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head.
Well, this is a lot. At Hotman Group, we definitely help companies. It's complimentary. Well, we will have a conversation with you and give you our opinion and thoughts on your GRC tool if you have one. So please reach out and schedule that. Would love to have that conversation with you. What would you like to leave the audience with in our final moments?
I think that it's just, fit matters more than features. That second one. You really want to take the time to look for a tool that's going to fit your organization. It's going to work for what your program looks like or what you want it to look like. And there's not a perfect tool, but also
Yep.
don't take forever to find the perfect tool because it doesn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And I like the last one because I'm all about the executive story that we tell and how we really equip the organization to make good decisions and to build maturity. And you can't do that ultimately without a tool. So tools support that, but that has to be part of your outcomes from the beginning, or it will contribute to a wrong tool choice. So we have future webinars. Please take a look at the list and sign up for future ones. Thank you so much for everybody joining today. Thank you so much for the questions and your time. Angie, really appreciate you joining us today and have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.